Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, I'm Justin Daniels. I am a shareholder and corporate M&A and tech transaction lawyer at the law firm Baker Donaldson, advising companies in the deployment and scaling of technology. Since data is critical to every transaction, I help clients make informed business decisions while managing data privacy and cybersecurity risk. And when needed, I lead the legal cyber data breach response brigade.
And this episode is brought to you by... That was awful. Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, e-commerce, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com. Why are you giggling?
I thought you were practicing.
It is when you start to giggle and then I am supposed to stay straight-faced and just keep talking.
Well, you're supposed to be the straight woman in this act, and sometimes we have to break that up.
Well, it's very difficult.
Good.
How are you today? Why did you decide to match me?
I didn't decide that. It's just the other.
You did. I was wearing navy first and you went and brought navy.
Well, since I have that exact same jacket, maybe next time I'll just wear it.
We should save that though for the next time that we do an episode with those people.
Agreed. Well, let's focus on today's guest.
Yeah. Oh, but today's guest starts with an I too.
Indeed, and we've spoken at their events together.
It's a 2-for-1 special.
Okay.
All right, so today we're really excited because we have two amazing people to come to us from ISACA. So we have Niel Harper, who is a certified director and ISACA board vice chair. He is also the chief information security officer and data protection officer at Doodle. Niel is based in Germany, and he has more than 20 years of experience in IT risk management, cybersecurity, privacy, internet governance and policy, and digital transformation. And we're also joined by Safia Kazi, who is a privacy professional practices principal at ISACA. She has worked at ISACA for just over a decade, initially working on ISACA's periodicals and now serving as the privacy professional practices principal. She is based in Chicago. And in 2021, she was a recipient of the AM&P Network's Emerging Leader Award, which recognizes innovative association publishing professionals under the age of 35. So welcome to both of you to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Under 35.
You want to be under 35?
I'd like to be.
Well, you can work on that time invention. Otherwise, we're going to come back to privacy and security, which we can talk about today.
So, would each of you like to tell us a little bit about your career journey?
Please go first.
Sure. So I started my career out of college basically at ISACA, but I was working more on the publications department. So I worked on the ISACA Journal. I created the ISACA podcast program, so I'm also very familiar with the podcasting world. And then I was looking for a change. I wanted to continue writing, but was looking for a bit of a different role. And then this privacy position opened up at ISACA. So I did a lot of training on privacy, earned some certifications, and now I work on the development of ISACA's privacy-related resources.
Yes, and for me, I started out a few years ago, probably 20 or so, as a telecoms engineer. So in a past life, I built cellular networks and advanced optical networks for AT&T. But around 2002, I transitioned to security. I've worked across a number of organizations, Interpol, the United Nations, in CISO roles. Around 2006, I decided that I wanted to pursue law, and I did a master's of law, specializing in internet law on privacy. So since then, I've been practicing privacy and developing privacy programs at a number of organizations.
Well, welcome to both of you. We're really excited to have you here and talk about a very fascinating report that ISACA conducted called the State of Privacy 2025, or a survey rather. And so I highly encourage everyone to go find it, but it provides insights into key trends in privacy staffing, board prioritization, compliance, AI usage, privacy training, and more. I can only say so much here. This discussion, we're going to explore the major findings for privacy professionals. So let's talk a little bit about privacy staffing shortages, because this remains a challenge and many teams are struggling and they're finding that their teams are shrinking. And the survey that I have notes that it seems to have shrunken from 9 to 8, kind of on average, but overall I am seeing companies hiring less and shrinking teams. So what do you think is driving this change, and how are companies managing to do more with less?
Yes, sure. I think a number of privacy teams have become a lot more efficient through automation, streamlined processes, and just overall better use of tools. There are quite a few tools on the market right now that really help to drive efficient privacy programs. I think another reason as well is a lot of organizations have looked at where they can shift responsibilities for privacy to other departments like legal or technology, where you can put some of the compliance and regulatory work on legal and some of the privacy engineering work in technology, for example. And just to touch on two other subjects, I think you're seeing a lot more outsourcing as well. There are quite a few DPO as a service businesses, or one-stop shops who you can outsource interim roles to, or advisory or fractional roles to at a reduction in pricing. And just finally, I just want to say the maturity of privacy programs has actually increased as well in the number of businesses. And from that respect, as your privacy program matures, you require less and less staff.
So that's really interesting that you were talking about the different departments owning it and also the fractional services. So, I mean, we provide fractional services for some companies. And you mentioned that some teams might have legal own it. I am curious, and we see this where sometimes I call it the hot potato. Legal might own it. The security teams might own it. There might be a compliance team that owns it. So in the survey, was it kind of focused on a dedicated privacy team, or just anyone who might be touching on privacy?
I can speak to that. It was anyone who was touching on privacy. It is interesting, though, that you mention all these different departments, because a lot of our survey respondents say that they report to a chief privacy officer, but it was only about 21%. And then it was pretty even across a lot of other areas. A lot of people report into legal or a executive security level officer of some sort. But our survey was just asking people working on privacy in a full-time capacity.
And my last question is, in those chief privacy officers, is there any kind of theme as to where those CPOs report into?
Yeah, there, again, was not a whole lot of consistency. We also think that there are some regional differences. In some departments and in some enterprises, chief privacy is, potentially reporting directly to the CEO, while in other departments, there's more of a dotted line reporting to a CISO or a CSO, something along those lines. But it definitely depends on the industry, on the region, enterprise size, et cetera.
Thank you.
Well, Niel, I wanted to ask you as a follow-up, just from your day job as a CISO at Doodle, how does the privacy function work? Like for you, in your security role, how much responsibility do you have for privacy, or is that something that's separate and apart just in your day-to-day experience?
Yeah. So at Doodle, I'm actually CISO as well as DPO. So I hold both functions. That's usually not the case in a number of businesses, and we're seeing more and more that has become the case. But yeah, for me, I hold the responsibility for both functions. So I'm registered as the DP on multiple jurisdictions. I engage with supervisory authority, so I have that full kind of responsibility for both security as well as um, privacy. Excuse me.
Well, the survey also dove into kind of the work that people are doing. And so the demand for technical privacy expertise is also growing really fast and faster than the legal and compliance roles. So for example, statistic here, 57% of respondents expect an increase in technical roles compared to 51% for legal and compliance. So again, what are you thinking behind this shift, and how can privacy professionals adapt?
Sure. So I think, full disclaimer, some of it is just the nature of ISACA. A lot of the people we interact with and a lot of our membership base does skew a bit more technical than legal and compliance. But I do think that overall technical roles are highly in demand, largely just because of the ubiquity of technology. Internet connected devices are in so many people's homes and have become a crucial part of the way people live. As a result, there's more and more data and personal information that people are giving up potentially. And so I think the role of technology is just becoming more important. But I think there's also a really interesting piece of understanding how technology can impact compliance. Understanding your legal obligations is important, but it's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. The next question is, how can you configure your technology and your systems to best support compliance goals and objectives? It's good to know what a law or regulation is requiring of you, but then how do you go about applying controls that actually help achieve that outcome? So with that in mind, I think there are a lot of different ways that privacy professionals can try to adapt. And I think the most critical thing is you have to always have a learning and a growth mindset. You can't just get into your role and then say, okay, I'm here, I'm done. You need to constantly be learning, reading articles, reading books, taking courses potentially. If there are people in your enterprise who are really technically inclined, perhaps in an area you're not familiar with, perhaps you could do some kind of job shadowing to learn a little bit more about what that technology is like, what their job is like, and potentially how privacy can help support the work that they're doing.
Now, anything you would add?
Yeah, I think just to kind of drill down a bit, as more and more businesses focus on privacy by design, you're seeing at when a new product or a new solution is being launched, or when a major change is being made to an enterprise system. It's incumbent on to have a really technical person to understand some of the key parts of privacy by design, understanding how to ensure if you need to have information in testing environments, how that information is de-identified, understanding how to build architecture, how to build repositories of data that you can very, very quickly respond to subject access requests. It's also a number of businesses are really focusing on how to respond to breaches as well. So because incident response falls to a number of technical teams as well as the privacy teams, just having persons who understand how do we effectively respond to a breach, how do we contain a breach, how do we eradicate a breach, how do we then, that full life cycle of managing a breach, that requires very, very technical skill set.
Constantly changing, that's for sure, in the privacy space. Lots to learn.
Well, speaking of lifelong learning, AI is growing in its role in privacy. And apparently last year, only 18% of respondents reported using AI for privacy-related tasks, but that number jumped to 24% this year. So that kind of begs the question of, how do you see AI shaping the future of privacy operations? And in your experience, what should organizations from a risk perspective be mindful of?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of automation that you can achieve for privacy tasks, for risk identification, for building your registers of processing activities, and for just to really managing your overall risk as it pertains to privacy and data protection. But you also have to really consider those risks as you mentioned. There are a number of risks in terms of again, we mentioned breach. We're responding to breaches, especially if you upload sensitive data to an artificial intelligence platform. There's also forms of bias and discrimination that may be built into those platforms. You also have to be concerned about looking at your third party risk management in terms of before you onboard a vendor, understanding where the data is being stored. Is it being stored in a privacy respecting jurisdiction? Is it being used to train the large language models? You also have to look at transparency. To be compliant with privacy laws, you have to make sure that your customers are aware of where their data is being processed. So, there are a number of risks that need to be considered when you use new tools like artificial intelligence.
So, Safia, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add, and I think we're going to see this evolve quite a bit over the next decade or so, but I think some ethical AI work is going to fall to privacy professionals. So I believe the review period is closed, but NIST released a draft of their privacy workforce taxonomy, and there was a lot of work in there about ethical AI, detecting bias, detecting statistical bias. And I thought it was really interesting that this was being tasked to privacy professionals because I don't necessarily know that all privacy professionals are statisticians and can look at data and potentially detect and address bias. But at the same time, it's also interesting because if not privacy professionals, then who? So I actually think that as AI is more and more adopted just by enterprises broadly, a lot of the ethical work around implementing AI safely, securely, fairly is going to fall onto the shoulders of privacy professionals.
So, Niall, I'm just curious for your day job experience, because what I think Jody and I see are companies are all over the place in terms of their level of adoption, use, sophistication around AI. And just for Doodle, where do you feel that you fall on that spectrum?
So for our privacy program at the Doodle, like we have tools like one the Trust, and we have and other tools that have built in some features for artificial intelligence, but we're not really that mature in terms of using AI tools because we've built up a relatively advanced practice over the years. We have a very broad set of tools that makes us a lot more responsive, and a lot of these tools haven't really embedded any features.
So we've talked a little bit about privacy staffing, and budgets are kind of tied to that. And I have seen this in multiple places that privacy budgets are under strain. They're feeling underfunded. And here the survey was 43% of respondents felt their budgets were underfunded. I'm curious if you can provide a little bit of additional context to that information.
Yeah, so that was one of our more concerning findings. We also asked our survey respondents, what do you think is going to happen to your privacy budget in the next 12 months? So we've been doing the survey for 5 years. In general, respondents, I would say anywhere from 8 to maybe 14% of respondents say that they think their privacy budget's going to decrease. In 2024, that number jumped to 51%. This year, it was 48%. So 43% of respondents think their privacy budget's currently underfunded, and then 48% think that their budget's actually going to face additional cuts in the next year. This is really concerning to me. And one of the things that I think is happening is I think sometimes senior leadership may not fully understand the difference between privacy and security. And I say that because ISACA also does a state of cybersecurity survey. And last year, it was only about 13% of respondents who thought that their security budget would be cut. So, what I worry this means and what the implication of this could be is that security teams that are already also understaffed and struggling to find the right talent are now going to have to take on privacy related work in addition to all of the other work that they need to do specific to security. The other thing that's really concerning is that I worry that these budget cuts are going to mean that certain tools or perhaps the use of consultants are not going to be possible moving forward. And the reason that that's concerning is that 63% of our survey respondents said that their role was more stressful now compared to 5 years ago. So I really worry that chipping away at privacy budgets is making the work of privacy professionals much harder and ultimately potentially overloading teams that are already overworked as it is.
Now, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen constraints in terms of privacy budgets. I'm seeing more and more businesses are really kind of focusing on, how do you overcome the restrictions on staff? How do you overcome um, budget cuts? How do you continue to innovate and enhance your privacy program given that the cuts in budget? And it increases your risk, and it definitely, as we mentioned earlier in the discussion about how people are doing a lot more with less, it's causing the businesses and functions to be very resourceful. And again, you're looking at a number of different responses, whether it be outsourcing, whether it be leveraging tools and automation, better training of staff as well. Like, I think one of the concerns I faced in my day-to-day job is, we're having to train our security staff to now take on more privacy responsibilities as opposed to just their singular focus on security.
Yeah, well, that jives with Safia, what you were just saying. And I have seen and heard the same, where more security teams are absorbing privacy, and there's a massive education gap between understanding the differences because they're just very, very different. And we will save all of the differences for another podcast. So we will carry on with Mr. Justin over here with our next question.
We're going to the board now.
We're gonna go from the board. So we have a lot of education to do at the team level. We also might need to talk to our boards.
So, speaking of the board, and we have the chairwoman over sitting next to me, 57% of respondents said that their board adequately prioritizes privacy. So, from your experience, what differentiates companies where the board actively supports privacy from those where it's just a compliance checkbox?
That's a good question. So I found for privacy as well as for security, one of the number one reasons for a privacy program or a security program failing is a poor tone from the top. So it's very important to have that tone set from the top, from the board, that trickles down through executive management, the middle management, et cetera, where the importance of privacy, not just as a compliant function, but privacy also as a market differentiator. That's something we do at Doodle, that we're very focused on differentiating our products or services from our competitors by using privacy as a differentiator. But, organizations who have a privacy champion on the board or who have regular board briefings on privacy, emerging regulations, existing regulations, changes in regulations, fostering a privacy culture in your business, those are really some key factors in the success of a privacy program.
Those are great examples, really practical. And I appreciate you sharing how the idea of making it a market differentiator is really important, and that tone from the top. So ongoing education is critical. And I think understanding who those board members are and how they think so that you can tailor the updates to them, sliding in the privacy pieces is going to be important. Some people are going to be risk-based, fine-focused, visuals, bullets. Really understanding who they are and how they respond is important.
I thought you said risk-faced.
I did say that, and then I corrected myself. But thank you for pointing it out again.
Well, thought that could be an interesting kind of dolly project. What does a risk-face look like?
There you go.
Anyway.
I love you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on.
Someone's getting in trouble after this podcast. Go ahead.
All right, so kind of tying all of this together is really privacy by design, right? We've been talking about staff and education and tools and building it in on an ongoing basis and educating our board. And so some organizations are consistently practicing privacy by design, but it appears only about 27% of companies are practicing that on an ongoing basis. Any thoughts as to why that number is low?
Yeah, so interestingly, about 43% of our survey respondents said that not practicing privacy by design was a common privacy failure. So it's a little surprising that only 27% say they always practice it. But what we found when we compared those who always practice privacy by design to our total respondents is that those in organizations that always practice privacy by design have way more resources. They have larger median privacy staff sizes. They're more likely to say that they're appropriately funded. Fewer saw decreases in their privacy budget. They were also more likely to say that the board adequately prioritized privacy. So I think a lot of enterprise privacy teams want to practice privacy by design more, but when they're understaffed, when they don't have the resources, it's simply just not always an option for them. That said, I think that there are a lot of ways that organizations can think about privacy by design, even if you have limited resources. Understand what projects are currently being worked on, and then look at the data. So is there a particular project where privacy by design would be really important? That might be a project for privacy teams to get involved with and support privacy by design. So a project involving health data is probably going to be really important, whereas a random project that really is only requesting people's email addresses maybe isn't as high of a priority. So I think even with limited resources, it is possible to prioritize and practice privacy by design.
That makes sense. Now, anything you want to add to that conversation?
Yes, sure. I think from a practical day-to-day perspective, building privacy gates or privacy checkpoints in the software development lifecycle, is a really good way to, in terms of practicing privacy by design, because then it becomes part of your muscle memory, part of the discipline of building solutions with privacy as the default. But, again, we mentioned awareness and education as well. You really have to continually educate staff about why privacy by design is important. Also, training in terms of completing DPI A's, the data protection impact assessments. That's a critical gap that we've seen where a number of organizations or a number of staff find it burdensome. I think we're also seeing continued training and certification. For example, ISACA's focus on or certified data privacy solution engineering certification, where you have to give people a deep understanding of how to implement privacy by design. Also, it's integrating them again across stages of developing products as well, whether it's integration with legal, integration with compliance, integration with a number of different teams who have intervention points where they support the overall privacy by design standards.
That makes a lot of sense. Doesn't it, Mr. Justin?
It does. So whenever we have our guests come on, we'd love for you to share, each of you, if you have a best personal privacy tip for our audience.
Yes, my personal privacy tip is to vote with your money in the sense of purchase products, work with organizations that prioritize privacy. Niall was talking about how privacy can be a competitive advantage, but if we support businesses that do really sketchy things from a privacy perspective, we're reinforcing that bad behavior. One resource, not ISACA endorsed, but just a resource I personally really like, is Mozilla Foundation. They have a guide called Privacy Not Included, and it's very basic language. You don't have to work in privacy or security to understand it, and it just walks through the privacy practices of a lot of different IoT, internet-connected, wearable kind of devices, and helps you be an educated consumer and support businesses that align with your privacy preferences.
That sounds like a great resource. Thank you. Niall, what about you? What's yours?
Yeah, I would say to regularly review and adjust the privacy settings on your devices, whether it be, regardless of your form factor, whether it be your laptop, your tablet, your mobile device, and ensure that you understand that the privacy setting, make sure you don't grant more permissions than are needed for a certain solution or piece of software to actually work. Make sure you also look at your social media accounts or your online accounts. For example, like I switch off any assistance, any personal assistance on my mobile phone. I switch off location-based data storing. I also use tools like Privacy Badger. So, really start to become more aware of the different tools, the different settings that help you to better manage your digital footprint.
Thank you. And when you are not working on all things privacy and security, what do you like to do for fun?
I have far too many hobbies. I write for work, but I also write for fun. I'm writing a novel. I've written several short stories. I do bookbinding. I like textile arts, and I sew some of my own clothing, and I'm learning how to knit, and I do embroidery. So I keep very busy.
It sounds like it.
Okay, so for me, I am a collector of whiskeys. That's one of my hobbies. I'm also a watch collector. I spend a lot of time collecting watches, attending watch events, and I would also say I'm a collector of rare comics.
Okay.
So those are my hobbies outside of work.
Very eclectic, creative outlets that everyone has here. As we all know, privacy and security can be fun and stressful at the same time. So having something to do is always good. It's fun to ask this question. We get all kinds of really unique hobbies. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If people would like to connect with you and, of course, to learn more about the report, where can they go?
Sure. The report can be found on the ISACA website. It's called State of Privacy 2025, and I'm also on LinkedIn, just Safia Kazi.
Yes, I can be found on LinkedIn, Mastodon, and LinkedIn and Mastodon.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And everyone listening, we highly encourage you to go grab a copy of the ISACA State of Privacy 2025 report.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.